Invasive species are plants and animals that have been introduced, whether accidentally or on purpose, into their current habitat. They can cause harm when they establish themselves at the expense of native plants and animals, encroaching on their food or habitat. Although some invasive species removal projects have been successful, once established, populations of invasive species can be difficult to remove. How are they harmful? According to the Center of Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health, invasive species have put more than 40% of the nation's threatened or endangered species at risk of further decline. Invasive species' new environments often lack the natural controls, like predators or disease, that might have otherwise kept them in check. Once an invasive species is established, it can be impossible to eradicate. Instead, habitat managers must focus on reducing its numbers or containing its range. Controlling invasive species takes time, money, cooperation, and commitment, which is why it is crucial to prevent them from being introduced in the first place. Native to the Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio river basins, blue catfish were introduced to the James, Rappahannock, and York rivers in the 70s and 80s as recreational catch. Today, blue catfish can be found in almost every major tributary in the watershed. It has a long lifespan and expansive diet, which can include crustaceans, worms, and other fish. Their growing numbers and rapid expansion through the region have raised concern about their potential impact on the menhaden, blue crabs, and other native species that play an important role in our ecosystem and economy. In 2012, the Chesapeake Bay Program's Sustainable Fisheries Goal Implementation Team adopted an invasive catfish policy statement, which outlines the need to control the effects of these non-native fish. The goal team's invasive catfish task force hopes to manage their spread while keeping in mind their recreational value. Mute swans are large white birds that can be found in ponds, creeks, and other shallow waters across the region. Mute swans were introduced to the watershed in 1962 when 5 birds escaped from an estate on Maryland's eastern shore. Mute swans can cause significant damage to underground grass beds, pulling plants up by their roots to feed and reducing the amount of food and shelter available to native wildlife. On land, breeding mute swans can be protective of their nest, hissing and chasing birds, mammals, people, and other perceived intruders. This can displace natural wildlife from their feeding and nesting grounds. Both Maryland and Virginia have issued management plans for the mute swans. Northern snakefish are long fish with a modified snake pattern and a large mouth filled with teeth. Native to China, northern snakeheads were discovered in Crofton, Maryland, in a pond in 2000. They have since spread to the Potomac rivers and its tributaries. In 2012, northern snakes were also documented in the Rappahannock River. Northern snakeheads feed on and compete with native fish and may act as carriers of parasites and diseases that could be transmitted to native wildlife. At least 13 states have banned the possession of live snakeheads, including Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. If anglers in Maryland, Pennsylvania, or Virginia catch a snakehead, they may immediately release it but are encouraged to kill it. Nutria are large semi-aquatic rodents that can be found in marshes, wetlands on the Delmarva Peninsula. Native to South America, nutria were introduced to the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge in 1943 to establish an experimental fur station. Since their introduction, nutria have destroyed more than 7,000 acres of the refuge's marshland. Nutria can cause significant damage, digging out plants by the roots and to free and create eatouts that are susceptible to erosion. When marshland becomes open water, valuable habitat for native wildlife is lost. Efforts to control nutria began in the mid-50s. In 2004, Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge was declared nutria-free. Today, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service continues to oversee the Chesapeake Bay Nutria Eradication Project, which works to remove nutria from the region. Phragmites, also known as the common reed, is a tall perennial plant that grows in marshes and wetlands across the region, often colonizing ditches, roadsides, and other disturbed areas. While the phragmite has been present in North America for more than 3,000 years, the introduction of a European strain of the plant has caused the phragmites to grow expansively. Today, phragmites dominate the mid-Atlantic marshland and is estimated to cover as much as one-third of the tidal wetlands. They grow so thickly that they can crowd out and replace native wetland plants. Purple loosestrife is a perennial plant that grows in marshes and wetlands and along the edges of rivers, ponds, and reservoirs. Native to Eurasia, the plant was introduced to the region in the 1800s for ornamental and medicinal reasons. Because it grows fast, produces lots of seeds, and has no natural predators, it can establish itself in new areas, crowding out and replacing native wetland plants. Water chestnuts is a floating plant found in shallow, slow-moving rivers and lakes. Native to Europe, Asia, and Africa, the plant was introduced to New England in the 1800s to use as ornamental plants in ponds. It was first spotted in the watershed in 1923 on the Potomac River near the District of Columbia. It spreads rapidly and can now be found in Maryland's Bird and Sassafras rivers. As it grows, water chestnuts form dense floating mats that block sunlight from reaching the underwater grass beds growing below. It can also disrupt boat traffic. Zebra mussels are freshwater bivalves found in lakes, rivers, streams, and reservoirs. Native to Europe, zebra mussels were discovered in the Great Lakes region in 1988, introduced likely from a ship's ballast water. In 2002, a population was discovered in the upper Susquehanna River, and zebra mussels have since spread further into the watershed. Zebra mussels are efficient filter feeders that can remove a lot of plankton, an important source from the water. Zebra mussels can also attach themselves to native mussels and to man-made structures, encrusting boat hulls and buoys, clogging intake pipes, and impeding navigation. The emerald ash borer is a green, shiny beetle that lives on ash trees in certain parts of Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Native to Asia, the emerald ash borer was discovered outside of Detroit in 2002 and made its way to the Bay watershed in 2003, when a Michigan nursery shipped ash trees to Maryland. Adult beetles cause little damage to ash trees, but larvae feed on the inner bark, disrupting the distribution of water and nutrients throughout the tree. The Chinese mitten crab. It's a light brown crustacean with a distinctive pair of hairy white-tipped claws. Native to East Asia and a member of the Law Foundation's top 100 worst invasive alien species list, it has recently been found in small numbers in the bay. In abundance, it not only competes with native species for resources and threatens populations through the predation, but it also damages fishing industries by feeding on fish in nets and damaging nets and other equipment. The veined whelk. It's a large predatory marine snail that inhabits the lower bay. It is native to the Sea of Japan and the Bohai, Yellow, and East China Seas in Asia. It was first discovered in the bay in 1998 by a trawl survey group from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science and is believed to have been transported in the larva form through ballast water from trade ships. It poses a threat to the bay because it preys on natural bivalves like clams, oysters, and mussels, which are vital to the region's economy and ecosystem. It feeds by wrapping itself around the hinge of the prey shell, then feeding between its openings. The European gypsy moth. It's one of the most destructive pests that has ever been introduced to North America. Moth, moth, moth larvae gorge themselves on foliage from shrubs and trees, leaving the plants bare and susceptible to disease and damage from other pests. The gypsy moth was accidentally introduced into the United States in Medford, Massachusetts in 1869 by a professor conducting silk research. It has been established in parts of the eastern North America for more than a century. HABs. Algae are a vital component of the bay's ecosystem. These free-floating plants make up the base of the food web. Their size ranges from tiny microscopic cells floating in the water column to large mats of visible microalgae that grow on the bottom of sediments. Algae behave much like land plants, soaking up the sun's rays to provide energy while converting carbon dioxide to oxygen during photosynthesis. In addition, certain algae can produce harmful chemical toxins that are harmful to humans, wildlife, and aquatic life. Fortunately, of the more than 700 species of algae in the bay, less than 2% of them are believed to have the ability to produce toxic substances. Harmful brown tides caused by A. Anophaginiferanus, wow, that's a hard one to say, often called the Long Island brown tide, have occurred in estuaries along the East Coast since the mid-80s, resulting in significant ecosystem and socioeconomic impacts in the region. Blooms have shown to cause recruitment failure of other commercial important bivalves, such as mussels and hard clams. Pfisteria is the name of a dinoflagellate. Pfisteria is a microscopic organism that sometimes behaves like a plant and sometimes like an animal. Unlike other dinoflagellates that cause red and brown tides, Pfisteria does not cause discoloration of the water. It has a complicated life cycle that includes a number of stages. In a few of those stages, it can produce a toxin that is harmful to fish. Pfisteria toxin may also have negative effects on people. It has been associated with fish kills in the Neuse River in North Carolina and the Pocomoke River in Maryland and Virginia. So, what is a PLO? Research on Pfisteria has led to other similar organisms being discovered. Scientists are still learning about those close cousins of Pfisteria and have begun to call the whole group Pfisteria-like organisms, or PLO. Do they affect humans? Well, a variety of symptoms have been reported from researchers who worked with Pfisteria in North Carolina and from watermen in both North Carolina and Maryland. Medical teams from university medical schools have examined 39 people from Maryland and 4 people from Virginia who they thought had health effects from Pfisteria. These watermen, recreational users, and state employees described skin, digestive, respiratory, and memory problems. You see the ulcers on the fish, that is generally caused by Pfisteria. C. polycricordes is a species of red tide that produces marine dinoflagellates known for causing fish kills around the world, as well as for fish kills in marine waterways. Recently, high biomass bloom of polycricordes in the James River spread into the Chesapeake Bay and caused fish kills, beach closures, and public alarm. In addition, the Chesapeake Bay experiences blooms of Porocentrium annually. These blooms can lead to low dissolved oxygen, which can result in fish kills. Blooms of Carina occur occasionally along the Chesapeake Bay. The Florida red tide and Texas red tide organism is an alga that produces potential toxins that can cause human respiratory distress, toxic shellfish, animal mortality, and water discoloration. Several species produce brevetoxins, which can kill fish, birds, and marine mammals and are a severe threat to human health. Beachgoers and people working or living near the water can be exposed via sea spray aerosols to these neurotoxins, resulting in respiratory irritation in healthy people and potentially debilitating acute events in people with underlying respiratory illnesses, such as asthma. The long term consequences of recurrent exposure to these toxins are unknown. Additionally, Nichia and domic acid have been detected in North Carolina waters. Domic acid producing pseudonychia have been isolated from the Chesapeake Bay. The direct ecosystem impacts of these are mortality of seabirds and marine animals.